The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Hello again, everybody. Kip Keefer with you for another edition of Everything You Need to Know. This week, of course, our focus will be where the eyes of the nation are cast upon the horrendous situation that is developed in the state of California, specifically in LA County. Some of the most iconic, expensive, most breathtaking real estate on the planet. And it has been virtually wiped out in so many cases. Mass acreage affected by the terrible wildfires that have infected California for the last week or so and are continuing. This isn't like a hurricane. Everybody was horrified, and the news cycle, of course, usually 24 to 48 hours when something happens. This is ongoing because the conditions that were so primed for this to take place are still in place, and the Santa Ana winds, which have been the big culprit in terms of carrying this inferno all over the LA County area to some of the most exclusive neighborhoods, as mentioned, in the country. Those Santa Ana winds kicking back up, so we are right back in the extreme danger zone for the next 48 hours at least, and maybe even on beyond that. This is a situation, though, that I'd like to talk about from a practical situation of looking at this very analytically and unemotionally. Of course, emotionally, I am absolutely devastated for the people who have lost everything, their homes, their keepsakes, many of the special remembrances of lives lived in these communities, and even prior to that, ancestral heirlooms. I mean, it's just overwhelming to think about the human toll that a situation like this wreaks. And with all that in mind, I do want to say that what we're looking at here from a larger perspective, and of course the one again to emphasize, is the terrible amount of human loss of life, loss of property, devastation, complete heartbreaking anguish of these incomprehensible losses. But what's really at play here is a situation where it was inevitable that we were going to have this point in history, especially now, where some of the focus has started to change in this country and kind of revert back to what we originally were founded to be, which is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. That means the citizens are the government, and we can't all go to Washington and serve and vote and make laws. So we live in a representative republic where we select the leaders to represent us and go and do all the things I just mentioned. But on the more organic level, in federal government, in state government, in local government, there is a philosophic, tug of war taking place right now, and it has been going on for a number of years, where the whole purpose of government is really under the microscope. As citizens and as a representative republic where we select our leaders, those leaders need to be responsible, in my view, and in the view of the founding fathers of this nation, for the well-being, the safety, security, law, order, conduct of society that is absolutely necessary for a successful enterprise, otherwise known as a free country, with life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness as its tenets. And basically, what we've had here is this unbelievable philosophical tug of war that has emerged in recent times, where people are hell-bent on changing what the role of government is and what the role of leadership is, and transforming that into a situation where it is not the citizens and their safety and security and the services that need to be provided and not only put in place, but ready to activate when any kind of terrible adversity rears its ugly head. Instead, there is a movement in this country that had gained a lot of steam, and we were on the verge of slipping into more or less a permanent mode of that kind of philosophy. And that, of course, is government's role is to dictate policy and create all kinds of different hurdles that inhibit the ability of citizens to live as free people with the life and liberty to make their decisions of what's best for them and their families, and to also not be regulated to the point of absurdity to conform with policies and positions that the people that presume to pretty much take charge of the citizens' lives through the insatiable desire for power and control. These elitists, most of them, many of them, Ivy League educated, who have now deemed themselves superior beings, far more knowledgeable of what's best for you and your family than you are. These people arrogantly have stepped to the forefront and are telling you where you can go, where you can live, what kind of housing you can have, what you can drive, what kind of appliances you can operate. They lecture you on your shameful past in this country and the shameful past of your ancestors who have been abusive and cruel and brutal to other peoples and other races, etc., etc. They talk to you about the religion, the cult, really, that has become climate change, a belief that human beings in this blip on the radar that our lives entail on a planet that has been in existence for 4 billion with a B, 4 billion years, that in the brief time since the Industrial Revolution of the late 1800s, so we're talking less than 135 years, that in that time, human beings have impacted the planet and its future into an existential crisis by the moves they've made to modernize society and productivity and promote life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is an absurd position. It is one that was created by the elitists because it gave the opportunity to call this alarm bell situation to the citizens of this country and get them to fall into line and buy the narrative that our habits and our accentuating human beings, as opposed to this kind of obsessive worship of the planet and nature and all of the things that the far, far left environmentalists and preservationists and whoever else has their own fringe beliefs, that we are somehow irresponsible and absolutely shameful in believing that we want to make the decisions that are best for our families and our future and live the lives that we choose to live as citizens in a free country, where our free will and our decisions are the ruling philosophy behind our very existence. And this has been a tug of war, as I said, for a number of years, a number of decades, and it was spearheaded at its peak by the election of Barack Obama in 2008, who comes from the background of espousing these beliefs and brandishly announcing that the transformation of America has begun. And make no mistake, the transformation of America, as he saw it, was government to take control with extreme regulation, excessive taxation, and complete power and control over the lives of the citizens. And that's not the way it was drawn up. That is not what our Constitution stands for. And in fact, there are many provisions in the Constitution that absolutely prohibit this kind of hijacking of our system and were built in as safeguards to make sure that it never could happen. So it was inevitable that we get a situation like we have here in California where they have gone completely off the deep end in the last couple of decades. Of course, we've seen the Marxist-style control, complete government dominance in Washington. California has been off that rail for a long time and has been bluer than blue, completely educating their citizens and browbeating them constantly of the fact that they have a responsibility to step up for California and the environment and all of the considerations that go with that, allowing a state that's already in a volatile position and prone to have things, natural disasters like earthquakes, like these unimaginable wildfires, other climate situations that are not new and are not spawned by people developing an industrial society. The Santa Ana winds, by all indications, have been around for centuries. It's an atmospheric situation, and if the situation is right with the flow of wind currents and ocean patterns, these can rear themselves and appear in a number of different circumstances. And you have the perfect storm here of this completely indefensible environmental activism, which wants California to be in sort of a Garden of Eden posture, where we have to let the state be natural. We have to allow Mother Nature to conduct her affairs. And believe me, she does. Again, the planet's been here for 4 billion years. Again, the supposition that it is our influence that is causing problems for Earth is absolutely ridiculous, and you can't present any kind of logical case unless it's strictly emotional and, in a lot of cases, just planted into the psyche of people that believe these things. But that confrontation was going to come to a head where government stopped being prepared to handle natural disasters in an area. California is, of course, under the microscope here. And instead of preparedness, like you see in Florida, when a major hurricane is imminent, the authorities under Governor Ron DeSantis have mobilized weeks in advance when that is an inevitable event and staged so much relief and different response vehicles to make sure that the damage and the devastation and the disruption of people's lives and the loss of life is mitigated to the utmost standard. In California, that is not the priority. Preparedness is not a consideration. The consideration is to make cuts in citizen services, in de-emphasizing preparedness, in ignoring the imminent threats that you know are going to be coming, like wildfires, with stubborn positions by environmentalists involving water levels, because there's certain species that can't thrive if water levels are not controlled. Animals and marine life in California, particularly a tiny fish called a smelt, who's been around since prehistoric days, basically is a minnow that lives in waterways in California. And there's been so much regulation and restriction on common sense things that need to be in place for preparedness. And in this most recent situation, you had by far the worst damage and the devastating toll of these fires have been wrought on Pacific Palisades, which is an iconic community just below Malibu, some of the most expensive and breathtaking real estate in the country. But Pacific Palisades, which is supposed to be protected, the preparedness of a major multi-million gallon reservoir was supposed to be in place to control and answer situations like this particular unfathomable confluence of circumstances that have led to these devastating fires. But it just so happens that right now the reservoir that is in charge, that is planned, that is in place to mitigate these kind of circumstances, well, guess what? It is right now offline for maintenance. I don't know how long it's been offline. I do know that it's virtually drained. I don't know what kind of maintenance is being performed, but you can bet your bottom dollar that it's something that is inspired by ignoring the fact that it would be totally irresponsible to be caught with your, figuratively, with your pants down and not have a functioning water source capable of battling this kind of catastrophe. You can bet your bottom dollar that it is some kind of regulation or some kind of environmental requirement that has prompted whatever kind of alterations are being done to the water supplies or not being done to address concerns by a small fringe group of fanatics that seem to be in position to dictate policy. And it all comes, of course, not only from a fringe of people that have different ideas about the needs of human beings and citizens and taxpayers that are funding everything. California, of course, the highest taxes in the country. People have fled in droves to get away from that. Regulation is just unfathomable in terms of how much everyday proclamations are put out with all of these environmental restrictions on doing just about everything, even common sense thing in a state that's very vulnerable, of course, to these devastating fires. So much regulation is on the books to protect the forest areas, the wooded areas, the undeveloped areas of the state by not practicing fundamental things that would help lessen the devastating effect of what we're seeing, particularly deforestation. If you don't know what that means, it basically means constant maintenance of wooded areas, of forest areas, of high foliage and underbrush areas. It requires a significant investment to clear dry brush or lifeless trees, other kinds of plant life that is vulnerable to these kind of fires, because if you have a lot of dead vegetation, they become dry and a tinderbox, really, for the smallest spark that can start innocently enough a fire in a field. But with the combination of that and the Santa Ana winds, all of a sudden you've got these fireballs blowing through the sky at warp speed, hurricane wind speed, and you see the devastation that brought, wiping out whole neighborhoods, giant subdivisions, again, some of the most breathtaking real estate in the entire country. So the simple practice of refusing deforestation because it somehow violates the natural nature flow is one of the root causes to why this has happened. Also, in a state that is prone to these kind of fires, it is so totally irresponsible that the state 25 years ago did not make the commitment with the development of the technology that is being commonly used at other places that are far less volatile to have major power structures, major power towers, and different arrays airborne, when all of that could be secured underground. Is it a big undertaking that would cost
billions of dollars? Absolutely. But it was a logical preventative measure. But once again, environmentalists and other people who in California were determined to spend their revenue in places other than protecting the citizens and their state, instead preferring to be sanctuary cities to millions upon millions of migrants, to spend money on all kinds of social programs and other concerns, and cut the budget of public services and preparedness and equipment. Do you know that states all over the country were sending firefighting equipment to California,
who had shipped a lot of theirs out, as a matter of fact, a couple of years ago to aid the war effort in Ukraine? They made themselves vulnerable to, once again, support a popular kind of left position. And the bottom line is, when states sent equipment, they didn't allow the equipment to go straight to the lines in the last couple of weeks that would help this situation. They had to be shipped directly to Sacramento to be assessed to make sure they were in compliance with emission standards and regulatory restrictions of equipment that is not permitted in California unless it goes under rigorous testing to prove its validity and ability to be used. So you have all of these nightmare scenarios coupled with another startling fact that the citizens of California who have voted for these policies for so many years had to stand and watch their homes, their neighborhoods, their hopes and dreams burn to the ground with very little or no effort to save their property, because services have been cut to the point where there was not anywhere near adequate response in terms of first responders and firefighters, coupled with the fact that we just talked about the water. In many cases, there was not water available to fight these blazes, and the usual approach of deploying aircraft for aerial dumps of water and flame retardant weren't an option because the winds were so intense. It wasn't safe for that kind of equipment to be permitted to fly in such dangerous conditions. So again, no pun intended, this is the perfect storm that we've seen, and it's the perfect illustration of when government becomes so self-important that they believe making policies and restricting the protection and safety and security of human beings is their primary role. You get these disaster, worst case scenario situations. The insurance industry recognized this. The insurance industry on wildfire after wildfire, just getting beaten to a pulp in terms of financial exposure, started in the early part of 2024 to cancel hundreds of homeowner protection policies because the liability for the insurance company became excessive. And when that happens in a free market society, what is the only methodology to keep those protections is to allow the service provider to set the pricing guidelines that will make it the feasibility possible to continue to insure people. And when they tried to propose an increase of rates based on the business model that, insurance companies are not in play, are not in business to go broke. When they tried to get regulatory permission to adjust rates, they were flatly refused by the leaders in California. They put caps on what they could charge.
So the insurance people started to pull out. And the insurance people did not just pull out because of the economics. The insurance industry began not to write any more policies and cancel a lot of existing policies because of the fact that the risk was so great, and the state routinely took step after step after step to increase the danger by, once again, not having proper systems installed, not having preparedness, not having basic services like adequate firefighters, emergency response personnel, if God forbid there's another earthquake, a serious earthquake, which is imminent at some point. And in this particular case, even having the crucial element to battling these kinds of situations, which is pre-deployment and total preparedness of the water and all of those resources that are necessary. The insurance company looked at the situation and said, this is a powder keg. And, we're not going to insure a powder keg that the fuse is already lit, because it's going to happen and it's going to be completely devastating economically. And from again, in a system of free enterprise, you have to let the providers of services price accordingly. And it's government's responsibility to work with those providers and also commit whatever resources they need to in terms of financial support and preparedness. I keep using that word, but that is the main term that you've got to have in mind when you think about what happened here. The fact that California was not prepared to respond to this emergency and knew it was coming. I heard a report last week on the Weather Channel that next week Santa Ana winds are imminent in California, albeit that's just a week out. But that's something everybody knows is just about every seasonal thing, or at least every couple of years. That, coupled with the fact that there had been a historic lack of rainfall in the last few months, meant you had all of this dry brush and dead foliage and trees and things that were, again, tinder boxes. If in these high winds, if any kind of fire started, and with the power lines, the superstructures, of course, with hurricane force winds, you're going to have damage to high wires. They're going to contact the ground. It's going to start brush fires. Those brush fires can get to certainly be blown to structures. Structures catch on fire. Wood burns. Materials and housing burn. Those get transformed into embers and they get launched by hurricane force winds. It is almost like a attack on that nature can wage with these elements flying through the air, and you see the thousands of homes and neighborhoods that have been virtually decimated. And again, there was no response. They were just allowed to burn. The concern of getting people out of harm's way was admirably done by the authorities. But once again, an imminent threat that you knew was a reality was really not addressed and was really not intended to be executed because of budget cuts and priorities in every area other than the best interests of the citizens, the taxpayers of California. It is a disastrous situation. It's one that's going to make every American have to step back and sort of assess, where in the hell are we here? What is it all about? If it's not the citizens, if it's not the human element, if it's not the needs of humanity, any other argument right now rings really shallow and absurd, because, we're hearing the rallying cries from the leaders in California, the people who failed the citizens of their state, who just keep getting automatically elected. We saw in the last presidential election, Donald Trump and the Republicans make big inroads in California. A lot of people have left the state, and there's a lot of people that have historically been on the left, a lot of entertainers and actors. This is a real equalizer, because a guy with a small trailer built on the bluffs overlooking the ocean has been damaged just as severely as multimillionaires in Malibu with these grand stately manners. All of them have been put on the same level. The Democrats wanted equity. Well, they've got it in this disaster, because people in all different variations of life, all different economic standards, have all been affected by this. It comes down to, is government there
to serve the needs of their citizens, their taxpayers, their fellow Americans, their fellow Californians, or are they there to promote some kind of agenda of total control and power, which it really comes down to? And that's influenced, of course, by money of corporations and all of these kind of way out left groups. The priorities are all wrong. Government is not a propaganda machine by design, and that is what the transformation that's been attempted in this country has yielded. This kind of philosophy that we know best, we're going to institute the policies that promote our ideology, that the best and the brightest and the most elite are the ones who control society, and citizens, you don't have anything to say about it. Just get in line and do what you're told. And if that's the country you want to live in, there are hundreds of choices around the world. I hereby declare I have no interest in living in an America like that. And I think you're starting to see a strong movement of people that agree with that philosophy, that want to get back to America being the land of the free, the home of the brave. And we really need to step up and make it clear to all of these transformationalists, all of these people who think they know best, who really are only in place because of this severe ideology and the ability that they've somehow have developed to shame other citizens into thinking that anything outside of the box of getting back to the root situations of what has been cast as an evil country when it couldn't be further from the truth. This is the greatest country ever founded, and we need to get back to our constitutional principles, the vision and the brilliance of our forefathers, and have an America that all of us can rally around as American brothers and sisters. I don't care what you look like. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what your religious affiliations are. The best thing we have in common with one another is we are Americans. We live in the most extraordinary country in the world where everything is possible. The American dream is alive. And to restore that, we need to get back to the basics and get these ideologues and people who think they are superior out of government, out of the situation of practicing not public service. These people are 100% dedicated to self-service of their ideological identity, and self-service of their ability to enrich themselves beyond anybody's wildest imagination. They've got to go. They've had their run. It's time to take this country back. And this California situation is a horrifying but graphic example of what the whole struggle right now between governmental philosophies and ideology needs to be. It needs to be of the people, for the people, by the people. God bless America. God bless all of you. Thank you for listening to Need to Know.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.